read this out loud to you, and I'd like you to follow along as I read it. Yoonmi and Halmoni's trip is a story about a young girl named Yoonmi and her grandmother Halmoni. Halmoni is taking Yoonmi to Korea for the first time to meet all her cousins, all of her aunts, uncles, and cousins. In Korea, Yoonmi's family shows her places and teaches her about the Korean culture. Yoonmi begins to worry that her grandmother might want to stay in Korea and not return to the United States. How does Halmoni show she cares about both parts of her family? Use details from the text to support your answer. Let's take a look at number 1. What will your writing be about? Underline the focusing question in the assignment above. Everyone should be underlining the focus question in the directions above. You're going to underline the focusing question. Look up here. You're going to underline the focusing question. What makes up a question? Something with what at the end of it? What would it have at the end, Lexi? A question mark. So you're looking for something in there that has a question mark at the end of it, and that's our question. Number 2. Now, turn and talk to your partner about the question, how does Halmoni show she cares about both parts of her family? Go.
She wants to go back to New York to spend a year with her.
Go ahead, keep going.
And she says she likes me because she is nervous about her grandmother going and to New York because she wants to.
But how does Halmoni show that she cares about both you and me and her aunts, uncles, and cousins? Okay, you two continue to talk.
She cares about even though she has her family in Korea, she still decides to go back to New York just to be with.
So she's acting nice to them? And
Just to be with me, she's acting nice to father and read. And if she didn't care about her family, then she would have wanted to stay longer. Yeah. She wouldn't be upset when she was there. Yeah, when Yumi wouldn't have been upset. Because both of them
Right, but let's go back to the focusing question. How does Halmoni show she cares about both parts of her family? Now we know they're all related because that's what family is, right? So how does Halmoni show that?
You just said that on.
What does she do with you and me? Well, she does, doesn't she? And where does she take care of her?
Oh my God.
And where is their house?
I hope they end this.
Right, in the story it's in New York. Okay, so that's you and me. How does she help to show that she takes care of the other parts of her family?
Well, what you just said is true. Everyone just how? Oh, it's recording.
Hard to think of, right?
I know, but I didn't say it.
So we're going to come back to that after we look at the text a little bit.
Yeah, but you're saying that I'm a dumbass. So it's for you to. Yeah, but you're just saying.
All right, so we're going to come back together. Were you finished?
Oh no.
Was Ulysses still thinking and talking? So Ulysses, are you still thinking? Okay, so guess what? We're going to get a chance in a few minutes to look at the text, and that's going to help you with your answer too, okay? Let's look at number 3. The answer to a focusing question is called a focus statement. Your teacher uses some of the things you discussed to help you to write a focus statement for this piece. So we're going to copy a focus statement onto your writing draft. Tiernan, do you have a question?
What's a writing draft?
A writing draft is a piece of paper that you write on, and it's a draft, meaning that we're going to continue. This is our first time around writing it. And when we write a draft, it usually doesn't mean it's the final piece of writing that we do. It usually means it's a work in progress. Good question, Amelia. Yes. If you please take a piece of one of the writing drafts and put your name and today's date on that, please. I don't know why that's that color. There we go. On your paper, you see that you have the focus question here. It says, how does Halmony show that she cares about both parts of her family? What I'm asking you to do at this time is to begin writing your statement. However, we're not going to write our answer yet. We're just going to write the beginning. So as we've talked in the past, whenever we want to answer a question completely, we want to take parts of the question and use that in part of our sentence in the answer. So the question was, how does Halmony show she cares about both parts of her family? So we're going to take the parts. Halmony shows she cares about both parts of her family by, and we're going to leave the rest of it blank. You could, yes. Let's write our focus statement. Okay, you need to get busy. Let's go. Let me see your pencil. Your pencil's fine. Please write. Right. It doesn't have to be perfectly sharpened. Let's go. Okay, do you have all of those words? What is this? Holman? What is her name? How do you spell it? That's not how you spell it. Look right here. Look at what you're doing. We are probably going to make 2 of them. So this will be our first one, and then we might make a final draft on Monday. Okay? Oh, I did. I always like to make mistakes, don't I? Teachers are not perfect either. Thank you. Okay. All right, by now you should have your statement that's begun, but it's not finished. Let's go back to our pink sheet and look at number 4. When the class is ready, your teacher will reread the story aloud. Your job is to listen carefully for information that will help you to complete the graphic organizer. During the read aloud, every time you hear some evidence from the text that you think belongs on the chart, raise your hand. The class will stop to discuss what you have noticed and decide whether to add that evidence to the chart. And this is very similar to what we did last week with our story. However, we just didn't do the writing portion of it, but we did look for evidence.
That too.
Okay, last sheet for right now. You'd put your name on this one as well and put today's date. This will be our graphic organizer that we'll use once we find the evidence we think we should put down to help answer that focus question. All right, so again on this paper, we have our focus question right up at the top. How does Hominy show she cares about both parts of her family? And we have our graphic organizer. In this box, we're going to be putting pieces of evidence with parts of the family. Once we put that in there, for example, this one says Yoonmi and her parents, because that's part of her family. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the elaboration, the time she spends with them, we knew from the very beginning in the story, it told us that she lives in New York with them. She takes care of Yoonmi while her parents work. And then over here, what's this for?
On page number.
The page number of where we found that evidence, right? It might be. Okay. So our text might be a little different, you're right. So I think we'll leave that there for now, and if we find that in our text, we'll go ahead and correct that on the page number. This right-hand column we will not use until the next time we're writing in our lesson, because this is where we're going to check off if we actually use that in our writing draft, putting our opinion together. So today, we're really going to be focusing on finding that evidence in the text. All right. I need everyone, if you could, to get out your reading textbook and open it to our story. (189) is where we're going to begin with the title page. Your task right now is to follow along as I read. And if you find evidence that you feel would belong on our graphic organizer, you'll raise your hand. I'll stop, and then we'll discuss. Can you put your desk on your... Could you put your book on your desk, please? Push your chair. Thank you. Yes? We've got a little bit of time. Open it to your story, please. Yoonmi settled into the airplane seat and took her grandmother's hand. It was Yoonmi's first airplane trip. Her Hominy, or grandmother, had come from Korea to take care of Yoonmi while her parents were at work. I think that's where our evidence is, isn't it? Yeah. So what page was that? 191. Okay, so 191. So we're going to correct that on our organizer, and I'm going to continue. Now, Hominy was taking you and me for a visit to Korea to meet all her aunts and uncles and cousins. Hominy also wanted Yoon Mi to join grandfather's birthday celebration. Yoon Mi's grandfather had died many years before, but each year the whole family visited his grave and celebrated his birthday. Okay, Elliot, what do you think?
Yoon Mi's grandfather?
What about him?
He died many years ago.
Okay, so how does that support our question of how does Yoon Mi care about both parts of her family? Hominy, sorry, excuse me. Does that support what we're looking for?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to keep going. How does it support it, Matthias?
It supports it because she actually cares about her grandmommy.
But it doesn't say that, it just says he died.
Okay, hold on.
But she even goes,
Matthias, stop. I got a working one.
she goes back to
Okay, you have to talk louder though.
Korea because of her was taking me to her grandfather's birthday, even though he died a long time ago. So Hominy cares about that.
So what is Hominy caring about?
About her grandfather, even though he died.
Okay, so she's caring about the grandfather even though he died. I'd like you to turn to your partner for a minute and discuss if you think this is important evidence that we need to write down, or if it's not, and then why.
Important stuff. And it doesn't really say specifically that she cared, it just says he died.
So what do you guys think? Is it? Okay, so you think the grandfather's an important part of what they're doing?
But I honestly think it's very important, but it doesn't.
And why do you think that?
Yeah, we're just trying to discuss it.
Right, so we're on this page right here, and this is where you guys need to be. We're right here. Okay. Did you discuss with your partner?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that they care about him and want to celebrate his birthday. Yeah, even though you said.
If it comes out again, it's mine for the weekend.
Yeah, we know that, Carly.
All right, so let's come back together. Frankie, what did you and Jenna decide?
We said it wasn't really important, but it was evidence.
It wasn't really important, but it was evidence. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Like, it didn't really say she spent time at there because they usually only go there like once a year for his birthday.
Okay. Elliot, what did you and Colin?
It says Yumi settled into an airplane city, so she might be going somewhere.
And how does that support that Hominy is going to show care for her? Okay, right now, Elliot, we're talking about the question, is the grandfather important evidence to what we need to put down on our paper?
Yes.
Okay? We're not bringing up new evidence right now. We're talking about the evidence that we have. Mia?
Well, we shared that.
Okay, hold on. And these microphones, you have to talk into them, okay?
We got microphone.
Yes, but not everybody can hear them. Okay?
We talked about it was important because just because he died doesn't mean that he's not part of the family.
Okay, so you think it's evidence that should go on our graphic organizer. Okay, so we're going to put it on there very quickly because we've got to move on or we're not even going to get past the second page in our story. Okay, so we're going to write grandfather. And what is it telling us with time she spends with him?
His
What would we
birthday.
want to write here?
His birthday.
Okay? Tiernan, what would we write there?
His birthday?
What about his birthday?
That it's important because just because he died doesn't mean he's not a part of the family.
Okay, so when does a birthday occur?
Once a year.
Every year, okay? And so does that mean she's going back every year?
Yeah.
Okay. So, because remember,
It was her first time going there.
right, but that's you and me. We're talking about Hominy, okay? Hominy goes back, and how often does she spend time with the grandfather?
Once a year.
On his birthday when? Every year.
Can we draw a picture with it?
Not right now. Because we need to move on, because we've only gotten through this first paragraph. And we may find that there's more evidence later in the text that we could add for grandfather. What page number are we putting down?
191.
191. Okay, I'm going to continue. Once you're finished writing, if you could find your place back in the text. Yunmi was very excited. She had gotten her very first passport for this trip. And she had promised to send lots of postcards to her best friends Helen and Anna Marie. It was a long flight from New York City across the Pacific Ocean to Seoul. It would take 14 and a half hours. Hominy, however, had lots of things to talk about during their flight. She pulled out a thick bundle of photos of Yunmi's many relatives and began to tell her about each of them. Hominy said, "I think they will all be at Kimpo Airport. They are so excited to meet you and want to show you all around Seoul." When the airplane landed, they hurried through the airport to have their passports checked. Hominy walked Yunmi over to the long line that said, "Foreigners." The line moved slowly as the officer checked each passport. Hominy got to stand in the fast-moving line that said, "Nationals." Yunmi looked like all the Koreans in the Nationals line, but she had to stand in the Foreigners line. It made her feel strange. But when it was Yunmi's turn, the man checking passports smiled and said, "Welcome to Seoul. Are you here for a visit with your Hominy?" "Yes, how did you know?" asked Yunmi. "I saw you talking with your Hominy. She was my favorite high school teacher. I heard she went to America to be with her granddaughter. Please tell her Hojin said welcome back." Yunmi nodded happily. She wasn't a foreigner after all. People here already knew who she was. She was proud of her Hominy too. Hominy was waiting for Yunmi. Yes.
She was part of Hominy too because it was Yunmi was proud of her Hominy.
Right. But remember, our focus question is about how Hominy shows that she cares for both parts of her family. Jenna?
Hominy went back to America just to be with her granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
But
But that's not where this comes in. Did I just read that? Okay, so we're going to keep going because there's going to be some evidence in just a few minutes. Hominy was waiting for Yunmi and they walked toward big sliding doors. Suddenly, a huge crowd of people rushed toward them, waving and bowing. Yunmi stood still, her eyes wide. Everyone hugged her. Person after person bowed and embraced Hominy. Hominy was so happy she had to wipe tears from her smiling face. Finally, they walked past a long line of green and yellow taxis, and Uncle ushered Hominy and Yunmi into his car, and the rest of the relatives piled into cars and cabs. Megan?
it says, Hominy was so happy she had to wipe tears from her smiling face.
Okay, so Hominy was so happy she had to wipe tears from her smiling face. How does that tell us she cares about both parts of her family? Isabel?
Because she was happy because all of her grandchildren and all the people she was related to, they were making her happy because they were like hugging her and bowing to them.
Okay, so how does Hominy show that she cares about them? What's she doing? Sophia? Right, she's bowing, but there's something in the text. Remember, we're looking for the text. Nick?
It said that she had a white tear from her smiling face.
Tears from her smiling face. What happens when someone has tears, but they have smiles on their face? Can you turn to your partner and share with them? All right, let's come back together in 3, 2, 1. Taylor, what happens when someone has tears and a smiling face? They're super happy. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and put, would this go with grandfather? No. So we need to make another box, and we're going to put aunts, uncles, yeah, probably grandchildren, because they're not really cousins, are they?
I put ants, like the animals.
They're probably her son. Well, some could be aunts and uncles. Okay. Now, boys and girls, I would caution you that when you're writing this evidence that you don't take up the whole box, because I have a feeling we're going to find some more evidence that we would put with this particular group of relatives. So what are we going to write in here that the text supports? What did the text say?
She wiped tears
Taylor?
and smiling. She had tears.
Right? She wiped tears from her smiling face. And what page did we find that on? 194. And if you noticed, I didn't write super big because I have a feeling there's going to be some more evidence that will support this question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue to read. When you're finished writing, find us where we are in the text. They sped down broad highways, then through streets crowded with skyscrapers. In the middle of the city, at the top of a narrow, winding street, was a tall brick wall with a pretty iron gate. Inside was Halmony's house. Halmony's older sister, who lived there now, rushed out. A cat and a dog with a fluffy tail ran behind her. Halmony embraced her sister and bent to pet her dog. "Oh, I missed you too," she said to him. Then she lifted the cat onto her shoulder and carried her inside. Jenna?
The dog's part of her family, and so she's saying that she missed him because she cares about him.
Okay, so you're talking about the dog and the cat being part of their family, but how is she showing that she cared for them?
Because she pet the dog and carried the cat inside.
Okay, is that going to be important evidence that we need to put in?
Not really.
Okay, so let's move on. Because we're going to find some that we'll decide that it doesn't really need to go up in our evidence chart. During the next several days, Yunmi's cousins, Jinhee and Soonhee, took her sightseeing. Some students need to continue to follow along in the text. They went to the royal palace called, Josh, can you help me? Thank you. Yunmi liked running down the center of the wide steps where only the kings and queens and ministers had once been allowed to walk. They visited the National Museum. There, Yunmi learned that in the 7th century, Koreans built the observatory to study the stars. She also learned that in the 13th century, Koreans were the first in the world to invent the movable metal types to print books. They went to the bustling East Gate Market. A street vendor there was baking little cakes filled with sweet red beans. Jinhee, Soonhee, and Yoonmi each bought one and ate the cakes as they roamed the crowded stalls. Socks for sale, Silk shirts here, parasols on special, the vendors chanted as the girls walked past. Then Yoonmi's cousins took her to their favorite stall. There, Yoonmi bought 2 soft lavender and pink silk purses with shiny black tassels for her friends Anna Marie and Helen. Yoonmi was having fun with her cousins, but it was a little hard to understand their English. And when Yoonmi spoke Korean, her cousins giggled and said she sounded funny. Yoonmi had hardly seen Halmoni since they arrived. Her grandmother was often out, and when she was home, Yoonmi's cousins always sat on her lap and got all her attention. Halmoni, don't ever leave us again, they kept saying. Halmoni just smiled. Yoonmi sometimes wished everyone would disappear so she and Halmoni could talk like they did in New York. Frankie?
It says her grandmother was often out, but when she was home, Yoonmi's cousin always sat on her lap and got all her attention.
So, Yoonmi's cousins always sat on whose lap? Not Yoonmi's. Halmoni's lap. Is that Halmoni showing affection toward her relatives?
Yeah.
Should that be evidence we put in?
Yes.
Okay, let's put that.
It should go in grandchildren.
Yep, it's going to go in this box. So what do we need to write here?
Smiles after.
Isabel?
When all Halmoni's grandchildren were sitting on her lap, she smiled and was happy.
Okay. So she showed affection by allowing them to sit on her lap, and she smiled and showed affection.
That was on 198.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and continue to read. For the next few days, Halmoni did stay home. But all Yoonmi's aunts and cousins came over to prepare for the big picnic at grandfather's tomb. They spent 2 whole days in the kitchen making marinated beef, vegetables, dumplings, and sweets. Halmoni rushed about overseeing everything. Soonhee, Halmoni said as she gave her a hug, why don't you be in charge of making the mandu? You can teach Yoonmi. The dumplings are her favorite. Halmoni rushed back with stacks of thin white dumpling skins, a bowl of water, and a big bowl of meat and vegetable filling. Soonhee placed just the right amount of filling on half of a dumpling skin. Then she dipped her pinky in the water and ran it around half the edge of the mandu skin. She folded it into a half-moon shape and pressed the edge shut. Yoonmi tried making them too. Soon they started making funny-shaped mandu. Some looked like round balls, others like little purses, and some just looked strange. Halmoni smiled as she hurried past. Yoonmi saw how happy Halmoni was with all of her family, and Yoonmi started to worry. What if Yoonmi didn't want to leave? In New York, Halmoni had only Yoonmi and her parents and Yoonmi's friends. She was scared but tried to think about how much Halmoni loved her. Okay, Amelia?
Instead of saying Halmoni, you said Yoonmi.
Thank you. I need evidence from the text. Kevin?
Halmoni said that in New York she had only Yoonmi and her parents, but Halmoni still loved them.
Okay, so say that again. Hominy.
In New York, Harmony was scared, and she only had Yumi and her parents, but she still loved them.
I want you to think about that for a minute. Did you hear what Kevin said? Hominy lived in New York and was scared.
Yumi.
No, Hominy. But she stayed there to be with the parents and you and me because she loved them. That's an interesting thought. Can you talk to your neighbor about that for a minute? What do you think about that? Was Hominy all alone in New York other than those people?
Yeah, she was.
You need to put your feet inside and you need to have a conversation with Phoenix. So what do you think?
In New York, she only had Harmony.
What do you think about that? Do you think Hominy was scared when she was in New York? Why do you think that?
Because she only just hung out with her one friend. Then she would like miss out on her brother's birthday.
It looks like it's made that. Some look like rabbit. I think that's one of them that they said. And some just look strange. And also this one.
Okay, so you think that might be why she's scared?
The round ball.
Interesting.
That one kind of looks strange. Also a round ball.
All right, so let's come back together. Carly, what did you and Ariel talk about with that? Did you feel like Hominy would be scared in New York?
I don't really think so because she was there with Yumi for a year. So I don't think she'd be scared if she went back.
Okay.
But she'd probably miss her family.
And where is the rest of her family?
In Korea.
They're in Korea, aren't they? I want you to think about that for just a minute. It's hard to imagine that you could have family that lives so far apart. Isabel?
I thought it was important because if Harmony liked it better in Korea because she had more family members there, she wouldn't live in New York.
Wait, say that again. Did you hear that? Brandon, did you hear that? Amelia, did you hear that? Yeah. Megan, did you hear that? Can you push your basket in, please? I'd like you to repeat it again.
I said that I thought it was important because since in New York, Harmony only had Yunmi's parents and Yunmi's friends, and there was a lot more of her relatives and people she loved in Korea, then she would have just stayed in Korea if she didn't love Yunmi enough to stay there with her.
What do you all think about that?
True.
True? Okay. So is that something we should be writing down as evidence? Where would that go in our evidence chart? Talk to your neighbor about that for a minute. Where would it go in our chart?
Yeah, but that's already so full.
Well, we probably need to make a new.
All right, I heard a couple people saying it out loud. They said, well, there's no room up here. Guess what? There's another box. So where should we put it? In our next empty box. So let's put in Yunmi and her parents.
There's already a one over here.
And what are we going to actually put in this box? Anybody remember? Amelia?
That if Harmony didn't love you and me, she wouldn't be in New York with me.
Okay. Something else to add, Megan? Did you have another way to say it? Okay, Nick?
She stayed in New York with Yumi and her parents instead of
being in Korea with her all of her other relatives and grandchildren.
Okay. Wait, I think I'm confused now. Do I want to say if? I don't think we want to say if. I think it is true. Harmony loves Yoon-mi and her parents. And that's why she stays in New York, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What page are we going to put down for this?
199.
98.
No, it's 199.
199.
I believe it might be 199.
Yeah,
That's
it's
where
199.
it talks about in New York. Harmony had only Yoon-mi and her parents and Yoon-mi's friends.
Yeah.
All right, our time is getting very short now. So I'm going to have you turn to page 201. And since you've read this, I'm going to have you scan it quickly and see if there's any evidence on page 201 worth talking about. Right here. Right here. Okay, we have some evidence finders. Megan, what did you find?
I found that she said together they made 3 deep bows to grandfather. I don't think
That's part of it. You
I
can
don't
give that
think
to
this
Grandpa.
colony would really do that if she didn't really.
Okay, Megan, can you speak up a little bit?
It says together they made 3 deep bows to grandfather. I don't think Harmony would do that if she didn't.
Nobody can hear you. Nobody can hear you.
It says together they made 3 deep bows to grandfather. I don't think Harmony would do that if she didn't love grandfather.
Would that be evidence that we need to put in the grandfather column? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's write that.
I don't have one.
What page are we going to put here?
201.
Okay, so we had 2 more hands up over here. Was that the same piece of evidence or was there a different piece
No.
of evidence? Okay, Amelia?
It says Harmony said grandfather will be happy to see us all having a good time.
Okay, so it says grandfather will be happy to see us all having a good time visiting him and each other on his birthday. Why do you think that is evidence of Harmony showing
Because
she cares?
if Harmony didn't care, she would just been like, whatever, let's just party or something like that. Yeah.
interested. Why even think about it?
Thumb up if you agree.
I'm not so sure.
All right.
Kind
So you can put it on the back because there's room on the back. Okay, so what will we need to put here? Talk to your neighbor about that for a minute. What will we write in that column part? Right? Talk with your neighbor. What would you write?
I would say.
I don't know what to say. They celebrated and they
Us all having a good time visiting him and each other on his birthday. So what do you think we should write here? Okay, so Grandma's Harmony's mentioning that. Now, you don't have a lot of room here, so I bet you could write it right here on the back.
Let's write that.
Okay, I need you back in 3, 2, 1. You just came up with something to write. Please write that. I'm not going to write it on my graphic organizer. You had a discussion with your neighbor. Please write that down. If you run out of room, you can write on the back. That's what you and your partner were talking about. Phoenix, push in your chair, please. So what were we talking about? We should have been talking about this, right? Can you push your chair in, please? What were we going to put? Okay, let's write that down. If you don't have room on that side, you can do it on the back. Did you write down your thoughts? I need you to push in your chair. Let's look and see what you got. Okay, and what page number? Remember to put the page number. Did you write the page number? Okay. Now I have some very sad news. Our time is up for right now. So we will have to table Isabel's thought on page 201.